Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jada,
I'm Lisa.
and we are recording season 2, episode 4. Going to be talking today all about the soul and soul parts and how important it is to understand the soul parts and heal. Um, and I'm thinking that this episode is going to be really helpful for a lot of listeners because,
Mhm.
for my experience on this path, it was really understanding and conceptualizing this aspect of what happens to our energy body, to our soul as we go through life and experience trauma, experience wounding. And this is sort of like why we heal. This is a huge part of being able to feel really alive, embodied, ourselves, like coming home to who we really are. Uh, so I'm really excited to talk about this with you, Lisa.
Me too. It's a vast topic. We always pick these huge, vast topics, right, that we could come back to so many times. Um, and tracking is a huge part of an interesting part in our last episode that we talked about with regards to when you start looking at soul parts and understanding tracking. And so a lot of people have never actually heard the term soul parts. Um, some people are familiar with it, and it's actually described differently in a uh, kind of traditions and also in more the new psychology even, and how that's so. How would you, Jada, describe soul parts?
Well, my description is rooted a little bit more heavily in internal family systems or parts work, just because I've been doing a really deep dive into that aspect, healing myself with my psychotherapist. And I really love doing this work because I get it. Like it resonates so deeply to me. And so, how I see soul parts is that there's different aspects or parts of who I am um, that are all working for me or maybe against me in some way and or are exiled. They're sort of relegated to the basement. They are in the darkness, put away to never be seen. Um, and all of these parts of me, when I look at them all, they're all a part of me, but they're not really who I am.
Mm,
Myself is, an energetic being, and all of these parts of my soul all have different aspects that are helpful. They all have gifts and medicines. Even the parts that we might look at as unhelpful or bad, they're really just sort of like trying to help in some way. So, like the part of me that sabotages, or the part of me that tries to protect me from everything, and so keeps me a little stuck. So how I see soul parts is just all these aspects of ourselves that have been split apart, um, and maybe sent away or given too much responsibility in our lives, and then we end up not really being whole and integrated with all of the separation and maybe disharmony, let's say, between all the parts.
mm.
Yeah.
So it almost makes me think of, well, it does make me think of how we have kind of different roles in our lives. So in one way, we identify in a lot of different ways: mother, sister, brother, father, partner, student, teacher, all of the different hats that we wear. And maybe those might be the healed parts, right? Where they're working for us in a healed way. There's a harmony, as you said, that's happening in all
Hmm.
of those aspects of us. But then when there's wounded parts, that's where we can start to kind of run into some issues or roadblocks in our path, I would say, right?
Yeah, I would say like, but yes. And if we had a wounded part, like let's say, for example, one of my parts is a really strong protector and they will say no to everything. They'll say no to every opportunity that comes their way because everything's a danger. And that part might actually be driving the bus in my role as a business owner.
Mm.
So even
Mhm.
though that's the role I have as a business owner, if when I'm in that role, that part is like, in charge and doing and making all of the decisions, that's going to really limit my trajectory of like growth if that's what I'm wanting to do, or just having different experiences. So I think that, like, yeah, our roles in life, I think that the parts in our soul, the parts inside of ourselves can help the roles that we have in our life or hinder the roles
Mm.
that we have in our life. And I think in different aspects, different roles that we have, different parts come up, different parts kind of jump into that driver's seat. So like my role as a daughter, maybe the part of me that's like, that feels disempowered will kind of
Right.
step into the bus. It's kind of like, that movie Inside Out.
Yes.
That's essentially like parts work, like all the different parts of ourselves, like, when we have like core wounding or core memories being made that are really positive, then we're kind of it's like all those marbles. I don't know if you remember the movie, but like there's all those like little marbles that are kind of like filling up. So I feel like, yeah, like in each role we have certain parts can take like be sitting in that seat, like in the movie when they're kind of in the command center, like they could be sitting in the command position. And then when we're in another role, okay, your turn, another part comes in. And I think for me, like when I think about all the parts of our soul, the idea is that we allow all the parts to have a role. And so the parts that are maybe over um behaving or having too many experiences or that are wounded, we heal those and we allow them to have a more helpful role. Like for example, the example I had with being a business owner, if the part of me that's a protector is constantly kind of driving the bus with my business, maybe I want to heal that part and have them still be very discerning, but in like a really healthy way. So I'm making really healthy decisions in my business, for example.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you like conceptualize soul parts? I'm so curious because you've done so many different types of trainings and have just so many different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, from the shamanic point of view in which I've been taught, and I've been taught a couple of different ways, kind of points of view on soul parts. But the shared view has been that um, if we experience a trauma, um, whatever that might be, we can send aspects of ourselves away to be protected. And so it's not always necessarily, we have a part of us that's kind of sabotaging us, but also that we can um, send away aspects of ourselves to protect them, vulnerable parts, you know, a part of us that really feels joy, for example. And so we can be moving through life and like never really fully connecting with this joy in a moment. And so from our point of view that, you know, at some point maybe something happened where um it wasn't safe to feel joy. That wasn't, we weren't in a safe place, we weren't around safe people, or there's an unsafe experience that said joy is going to make you vulnerable and that's dangerous. And so we're going to send that over there so that we can be protected, because if we feel joy, it's going to be, and there's going to be problems, right? It's too vulnerable. Um, but then how do we get that back? Right?
Mhm.
How do we get that back then? Because then as we're moving through life and we just can't seem to connect with that that joy, we need to retrieve that part, right? We need to
Mhm.
heal ourselves so that there's space for that part to return.
Yeah.
That, eh, so the healing happens and then we call back that part so that we can fully connect with joy again. And and allow for that space for us to be able to hold space for joy within us.
Yes.
And so, and that can be, a gamut of things. Joy is just one example of that, but um it's not always so there's kind of two sides of that, where there's these beautiful lessons and teachings and insight have been sent away to be protected. Or on the other side of that, as you were saying, where there's parts of us that will that kind of come to the forefront to sabotage things,
Mhm.
or derail things, or and so there's all of these different aspects of us, or parts that
Yeah.
may be in need of healing, or we may need to heal and recall back.
Yes. And it's all so well intentioned. The
Right.
sending away of the joy is like, it's so well intentioned because, yeah, if you had a wound where experiencing joy meant you were slapped across the face or told to go to your room and be quiet, if you were having too much fun and you were told, like, be seen and not heard or whatever it was, it's so well intentioned to kind of bottle that up because we
Exactly.
need that connection to the people around us. And to lose connection to our caregivers or whoever it was, or if it happened later in life, like to, with whoever is important to us, it's not worth it in some way. So we just bottle it up. And it's to me, it's almost like creating that harmony as we talked about at the beginning, like bringing those exiled parts back out of the darkness
Mm,
and helping to heal them from what they've been through, helping to, as you said, heal ourselves to open the space for them to feel comfortable coming back and returning. But then also,
right.
like, maybe redirecting some of those parts that were a little bit more like doing too much. They're just doing too much. The protector parts and the manager parts, like helping those to like redirect some of our resources so that it's kind of an even playing field. Everyone gets a little bit of the action. And
Right.
and
And that can
it's
be
beautiful
so
family.
exhausting, right? What
Oh,
you're describing, it can be so exhausting.
mhm.
That's where burnout comes from.
Yeah. It
Right.
takes a lot of effort to like, if you have parts that have been sent away, it actually takes energy to hold them in that space. And we
A
don't realize
tremendous
how
amount.
a tremendous amount. And so it's like, our teacher Pete has said to us in class, like our issues, or he's talking about issues, but I'm going to be talking about this part of ourselves, these exiled parts, like they go into the freezer, they go into a deep
Mhm.
freeze, right?
Mhm.
And it takes energy to keep a freezer going. We have to plug it in. It's using electricity. Like and so it's the same with our energy system. It takes energy to hold that exiled piece in this little capsule,
Right.
this little time capsule almost. Because for me, when I do energy healing and parts work, like when I connect to these exiled parts, they're often stuck at the age that they were at when the wounding happened. They're often like 2 or 3 or 5,
Yes.
and part of the healing is to grow them up, and also to help to remind them that we are here for them. Maybe when the wounding happened, we weren't, as like a self. Maybe when, you were told to be quiet, shut down the joy, put it in a little capsule somewhere, that part of you is like, "Why aren't you standing up for me? Why aren't you saying,
Mm.
no, my joy's good. I'm going to experience this joy." So that part often sometimes loses trust in our ability to hold space for it and be there for it and like have its back. So part of the healing, as you were saying, to hold space for these parts is to remind them, like, I'm here for you now. I am older, I am wiser, and like you don't, like, you're not alone essentially. And
Reinstilling that trust,
mhm, yeah,
rebuilding it,
rebuilding it.
even.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
beautiful work, I think. And like with your training and some of my training, like there's that aspect of the gathering, like doing a
Hmm.
soul retrieval. And that's something I think a lot of people maybe have heard that term passed around here and there, soul retrieval ceremonies. Um, in your experience doing that type of work, what do you see, like for some of the listeners listening in might be thinking, well, yeah, sure, there's all these parts and yeah, it's an interesting topic, but like how is this going to change my life by working on this? So like in your experience doing like soul retrievals, maybe you can speak about your own experience working on your
Mm.
own self, or maybe if you can, give like confidential or keeping it confidential, but like,
Right.
talking about what you've seen with people you've worked with.
I can definitely do both of those things. But we were talking about just before we started recording the show that that when I was younger, I um I always got these report cards in grade school that was like, Lisa's so helpful. She's such a sweet kid. We love having her in class. And then one year it totally changed. And it was like, Lisa's a problem. She's disruptive in class. She's all of the things where it's like suddenly there were issues happening, and it was like a complete change very quickly. And I I at that time as a kid was going through challenging, traumatic um issues happening in my home, where there was divorce, which is very challenging for kids. Um just a lot of change, and I was not um and there was also um a lot of uh um aggression around me at that time as well. Um, and so as a kid, without having support for that, I started to lash out, and that's how it was showing. And and I didn't know how to communicate that, and I think that I had tried and failed. And so I wasn't feeling supported in it. And so I remember um being told, okay, so what's happened to the nice Lisa? We missed the nice
Mm.
Lisa.
Mhm.
Who's this bad Lisa? And let's put her in the garbage can and bring back good Lisa. And it was really well intended, um, but it was very damaging at the same time. And I didn't realize that until I was really deep into my healing work. And what happened with that was, one, that aspect of me that was shouting out for help and was upset, and it was coming out in all of these ways, because as a child there was no other way for that to come out without appropriate support, um, was being told that they're bad, that's bad, that
Yeah.
those feelings are bad. And so if you have challenges, you have to keep them locked down. You have to shut that away into this garbage can. And if you get angry, that's also bad. So you have to put that also in the garbage can. And what it did was it just created this pressurized container. And as I grew, stuff would just go in there and it would explode. And then I'd have to
Right.
stuff it all back in there. And what it did was create resentment towards myself. Why is this, and it would perpetuate and perpetuate. And I had a lot of challenges with that. And it came from just that one little thing, that one little moment that I wasn't seen and heard. I wasn't acknowledged. And I wasn't, um, the space wasn't held for me just as I was. There was a
Mhm.
judgment there,
Yeah.
and a very decisive throw it away.
Yeah.
And so that part got thrown away, and she got shoved into a garbage can.
Mhm.
And I held on really tight to that lid for as long as I could. And then when we got really deep into healing work, I suddenly remembered that moment and I opened up the garbage can. I visualized it, like I visually saw this because as a kid, I visually saw myself putting her in a garbage can too, which is very powerful. And that memory came back and I opened up the garbage can and I looked in and I said, "I'm so sorry I put you in there.
Mhm.
Please come out."
Mhm.
And it was very emotional. It still brings emotion to me because that part of me is now integrated with me. And so when I
Yes.
say that, it brings emotion because I feel such a relief, you know, um,
Yes.
and to have that apology come to me because I was apologizing to myself. And
Yes.
so, and accepting the apology from me. And
Mhm.
so it brings up so much emotion because it was such a beautiful moment and such a relief to say, "You're not bad. You're misunderstood. Let's hear what's going on with you. Let's let you be you." And when
Mhm.
that happened, there was just this like huge release, right? And that's a huge part of why we do like gatherings like this, right? Because it was a huge abandonment on myself, a
Mhm.
rejection of myself, a
Yeah.
judgment on myself. And so um to be able to heal that and return that aspect to me as a healed version who's seen, who's heard, makes me empowered, makes me feel seen and heard, makes me feel all of that pressure and release and the judgment is removed. And
Mhm.
that's that's peace, that's harmony, right? And
Yeah.
so, why do this work? Well, this is why, because it's insanely powerful and
Yes.
it is tremendously magical at the same time. It's empowering and we get so many gifts from it. Like
Yeah.
the gifts that we get when we
Mhm.
retrieve those parts because they have so much medicine, right? How much did she teach me? She taught me so much, right?
Mhm.
About
Yeah.
judgment, about compartmentalization, about emotion, about feeling seen and heard. Like it goes on, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so um, we have to um, just recognize that all aspects of ourselves are important. They're
Yes.
not good or bad. They're
Exactly.
important.
They're all important. And as you were speaking about that story, which is so powerful, Lisa, and thank you so much for sharing. And I totally like feel that emotion as you're talking about it because it's such a loving act,
Hmm.
to own and apologize and then bring them back into the fold.
Hmm.
It's so beautiful. And I was just thinking about how, when you had that part in exile, let's say, this is like
Mhm.
parts work term, but in exile or like put away, or you locked it in the garbage can. Do you feel that even though she was locked away, she was still sort of like running your life in some way? Like, did you find that you were constantly being triggered by situations where you weren't seen, where you weren't heard, where you were misunderstood?
Absolutely, she ran my life from that garbage can, right? What
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And anytime someone kicked at that can,
Mhm.
it would rattle, right? And like stuff would
Mhm.
leak out of there because it was like, "Let me out," right?
Yeah.
But yes, and so that's, it's such an important point because why then? Why should we go retrieve that? All these gifts and lessons, but also if we just choose to ignore it, we can't really ignore it. It's like a
No.
massive trigger just waiting there,
Yeah.
right?
It's like that part that's in exile is playing a part. They're involved in our lives, whether we want them to be or not. So either they're involved in our lives in an unhealthy way, and even the unhealthy way isn't necessarily unhealthy because it's all pointing us towards healing. Every trigger, right, is pointing us towards healing. So either they're involved in trying to get us to heal, or they're involved in like being fully integrated and bringing their medicines into your life, so that you can feel like you're there for yourself, but also probably you now probably value understanding other people and seeing other people and giving them that gift, I'm assuming.
It is one of my, you know, it's so beautiful and rewarding to witness that happening with people, like for us to be able to facilitate that healing, because as magical as it is to experience it, it's equally amazing to witness that
Mhm.
it changes lives so dramatically. It's amazing how much we can
Yes.
just change from that, you know.
Yeah. 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 And I think people can feel it. Like when you've healed and brought these parts back and you're more integrated and whole, um, we can show up in a way that's just more like clear. And that I think that people can really pick up on that and can
Mm,
and can, because otherwise people are picking up on that little part in the garbage can and they're like zoned in on it, and then they're kicking that can, as you said. But when it's healed and we're integrated and we're more embodied in our whole self, that I just think magical things can happen in our lives. We can have more more honest, more deep, more real connections with other people.
that's the thing, right? But two things come up when you're saying that is one, the authentic self. Our authentic self is accepting all of those aspects of us, right?
Mhm.
That's our authentic self. It's not ignoring any one of those and saying, actually, yes, that is a part of me. That's my authentic self. Can
Mhm.
we heal it and evolve it? Yes. But at any given moment, our authentic self is actually acknowledging all of those
Mhm.
soul parts, all of those
Yes.
aspects of us. And then in terms of connection, uh, if we have all of these parts scattered, we're not whole.
Mhm.
And how can we truly feel connected without that wholeness? There's
Yep.
always going to feel like an empty part that's not connecting. And it's
Yeah.
because we're not integrated,
Yes.
right?
And then that empty feeling, that place in ourselves that feels like it's missing a part, is going to look for it somewhere else. It's going to look to fill it somewhere else. And that's where we get into addictions, eating
Right.
disorders, spending disorders, I like to call them.
Mm,
Social media, like all of the things, drugs, alcohol, all the things that we can look to fill that place inside of ourselves where that soul part could be taking up space and flowing into our lives. So a lot of people I've worked with are who just inherently know that like their addictive behaviors are not any that are they just inherently know that what they're doing with their addictive behaviors is trying to meet that need inside of themselves, but they just don't know kind of what it means and what it's all about and how to heal it. And it's obviously a very complex thing to heal, but by just starting with just looking at doing soul retrievals and bringing more of their parts together into a whole
mm,
feeling, it's yeah, yeah, feeling that wholeness is so important in our lives, especially if we want to do anything creative, build anything, um, have a big impact on the world, you know, and show up in our roles with like healthy aspects, driving the bus.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's yeah. Yeah. The soul retrieval is pretty huge.
It is.
And in our
It is.
training, at least in the training that we share, the ceremony is called a gathering,
Right.
and I love that vocabulary because to me it
Me
really does
too.
feel like bringing all of the beautiful parts of our internal family system together again in harmony.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it works, the structure of it is like we have to heal the space to return the part, right? So, like there's healing of aspects of us, there's healing of this space so that we can hold space for the
Hmm.
healed aspects to return to us,
Yeah.
return the medicines and to fully embody. those things. And so, you know, when someone says, I just feel like something's missing, well, something is missing, right? There's a soul
Yeah,
part missing.
totally. Yes. Yeah. I just can't put my finger on it. There's something
Yep.
missing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Famous
Yeah,
words for the gathering.
it is. It's like, okay, I think we know what we're gonna do today.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like if anybody's listening to this podcast, well, hopefully people are listening to this podcast and this is resonating or it's hitting home, definitely reach out to us and see if there's something that we can do to support you or send you in a direction that might be supportive.
Yes.
Yes, because I think a lot of people are walking around in our society feeling this way, and there's not a lot of kind of mainstream options to support.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
mhm.
And we are resources for that.
Yes.
So definitely reach out.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is
All
such a
right.
cool talk. I love soul parts. Please, and I, you know, if anyone has any questions, definitely reach out too. Thanks so much,
Mhm.
Jada.
Yeah, you too, Lisa.